When most people think of World War II, they picture the beaches of Normandy, the deserts of North Africa, or the ruined cities of Europe. But you know, some of the harshest battles were fought far from any city, in the frozen, silent world above the Arctic Circle. From the Soviet north to the Norwegian fjords, soldiers endured months of darkness, storms that could tear tents apart, and temperatures so low that rifles froze solid. Yet, against all odds, they survived. Not through luck or modern equipment, but through knowledge, ingenuity, and an understanding of cold that, honestly, modern campers and even some survivalists have forgotten. Today, we're breaking down exactly how those World War II soldiers endured Arctic warfare. And handsommersante daser dikkas nos I how is a seul star. Thersazikas and nakas there. Hard-earned lessons can still save your life if you ever face extreme cold. The Arctic battlefield demanded survival beyond training manuals. When Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa in 1941, the German army expected quick victory before winter. What they got instead was an education in Arctic misery. By December, the Eastern Front had become a frozen graveyard for the unprepared. Soldiers froze in their sleep, fuel turned to gel, and frostbite claimed more men than enemy fire. Meanwhile, Soviet troops, many drawn from Siberian and Arctic regions, moved like they'd been born in the cold. Their survival methods weren't just folklore. They were based on centuries of practical adaptation. The same story played out in other theatres. Norwegian resistance fighters operated for months in snowfields and caves, and British commandos trained in the Scottish Highlands to mimic those conditions. They didn't rely on advanced gear or technology. They relied on principles. Media. Group. Soldiers conserving energy in cold, WWII troops resting in snow, men managing moisture. Arctic survival should stock, distribute, equally conserve energy, manage moisture, and use the environment rather than fight it. These soldiers weren't superhuman, they were methodical, and the lessons they left behind remain some of the most practical cold-weather survival strategies ever recorded. The first secret was understanding that warmth begins with dryness. One of the first things Arctic veterans learned was that staying warm had less to do with heat and everything to do with moisture control. Wet clothing in sub-zero temperatures could kill faster than a bullet. Soviet and Finnish troops perfected the method of layer rotation, a system that allowed them to dry inner clothing using body heat. They wore 2 or 3 thin layers instead of one heavy one. When one became damp, they'd remove it, tuck it inside their jacket, and let their core heat drive out the moisture. It was a constant process of managing sweat, never letting it soak through and freeze. German troops who ignored this learned quickly. Frozen sweat inside wool uniforms turned into ice armor, sapping heat and morale. The lesson still stands. The battle against cold starts with your own perspiration. Even today, experienced winter campers and polar explorers use this same technique. Vent layers when moving, seal them when still. It's the same principle that kept Soviet snipers alive through weeks of whiteout blizzards around Leningrad. The second key to Arctic survival was mastering shelter and insulation. No soldier could fight or live without shelter. Arctic winds could strip away warmth faster than any fire could replace it. WWII soldiers learned to build microclimate shelters, compact spaces that trapped body heat instead of losing it to open air. Finnish ski troops dug snow caves called kota, while German and Soviet soldiers built snow trenches, packing the walls tight to block wind. Snow, counterintuitively, was their greatest ally. Its trapped air acted as insulation, keeping interior temperatures near freezing, which was far warmer than -30 degrees Celsius outside. Soldiers could sleep inside snow shelters without fire, using only body heat and a candle to raise temperatures enough to prevent frostbite. They also built raised sleeping platforms from pine branches or straw to prevent conduction loss into the frozen ground. In survival terms, this remains one of the most useful Cold War and World War II era lessons. Cold doesn't kill by air. It kills by contact. If you're ever stranded in the snow, you should really prioritize insulation beneath you before adding layers on top. A foot of brush, or even just some folded clothing between you and the ground, can honestly mean the difference between rest and hypothermia. The third lesson was that fire is more than heat. It's morale and movement. While fire in the Arctic was, well, difficult to sustain, soldiers never underestimated its psychological value. The challenge wasn't finding wood, it was getting it to burn when everything was frozen solid. Soviet units used birch bark and resinous pine shavings, materials that could ignite even when damp. German soldiers carried chemical fire starters, small tins of magnesium powder mixed with paraffin, a precursor to modern field fuel. But when fire wasn't possible, soldiers relied on body heat redistribution, a technique we've discussed before. They used armpits, thighs and chest areas as natural warm zones, placing hands or feet there to reheat blood flow. In groups, men shared sleeping positions, pressing back to back or side to side to maintain warmth. You know, modern survivalists can apply the same principles with or without equipment. For example, a small tea light candle in a snow shelter can actually raise the internal temperature by several degrees, just enough to prevent freezing. The goal isn't really to heat the air, but rather to maintain equilibrium. Now, fire's true value lies in what it does for your mindset. It gives you a sense of control in a place where, honestly, nature seems absolute. We soldiers understood this all too well. That's why they guarded every ember like it was gold. Keeping the body fueled was just as important as keeping it warm. Soldiers who ran out of calories, well, they lost heat faster, no matter how well dressed they were. Soviet and Finnish troops lived on dense, high-fat rations like dried fish, pork fat and black bread. Foods that digested slowly and provided long-lasting energy. Later on, American Arctic units adopted the same model, favouring butter, chocolate and oatmeal over lighter rations. Even hydration was strategic. Soldiers melted snow in small amounts to avoid dehydration, but they never drank ice-cold water. Instead, they let it reach room temperature first, preventing body heat loss through internal cooling. Every sip, every bite was calculated survival. Perhaps, you know, the greatest lesson the Arctic taught World War II soldiers was that endurance in extreme cold really begins in the mind. Fear, panic and exhaustion, well, they waste energy faster than motion ever could. Veterans of the Murmansk front often spoke of thinking warm, focusing attention inward to regulate breathing and circulation, conserving energy through calm. It wasn't mystical, it was in fact disciplined awareness. Modern survival psychology echoes this exactly. Your body can handle more than you think, but only if you stay deliberate. The soldiers who lasted the longest were those who accepted the cold as part of the environment, not an enemy to be fought. They adapted instead of resisted. That mindset turned a frozen wasteland into something survivable. These forgotten lessons are still your best defense against the cold today. The Arctic campaigns of the Second World War were brutal, but they gave birth to timeless survival knowledge. Dryness before warmth, shelter before comfort, fire as morale, food as fuel, mindset as armor. These weren't theories, they were practices proven by men who lived or died by them. If you ever face extreme cold, whether in the mountains, the snowfields, or a winter power outage, the same principles apply. You don't need advanced gear, you need understanding. If you found this exploration valuable and want more deep dives into forgotten survival tactics and fieldcraft from history's hardest front lines, make sure you subscribe to In the Beginning, share this video, and help keep these lessons alive. Because history's greatest survivors don't just teach us how to endure, they teach us how to think.